So I wanted to discuss another 90s anime. So this is actually my favorite anime of all time. Last live, I talked about Ghost of the Shell. So I was actually talking about the manga, which came out in 1998, but it's also, there's been many iterations, many different anime, Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, TV series, there was a movie that was animated, etc. So I used to own the real DVD, not the GameStop cover. It's a long story, but like 90% of my anime collection is now gone, sadly. But you can see I love Satoshi Kon. He is my favorite anime director of all time. Katsuhiro Otomo, who directed Akira, there's a lot of others, but Yoshiaka Kawajiri, who directed Demon City Shinjuku and Wicked City. Ninja Scroll, Millennium Actress. I also have Tokyo Godfathers. So I want to talk about Perfect Blue. And just like with Ghost in the Shell, what I talked about during that live was that a lot of 90s anime were very, very, very philosophical. And they explored a lot of very deep concepts, whether that was identity, consciousness, self, reality, um, philosophy, religion, spirituality, the soul, the psyche, the mind. So spirituality, the soul, the psyche, the mind. So there's so many examples of that. And I talked about Ghost Live, I talked about Akira a little bit, and I talked about Serial Experiments Lane. But I really want to get into Perfect Blue. So I am going to show you the DVD. So that is Mima Kirigawa. She is the main character. She's the protagonist. So I do have notes. So Perfect Blue came out in 1997 when I was a sophomore in high school. So I've seen it a bunch of times. It is a psychological thriller. Some people say it's a horror. Like, you can debate what the genre is. There is a lot of violence in it. There's gore, right? I think it's more psychological though, so I would say that it leans more into psychological thriller than like a straight up like horror anime. But yeah, I just want to kind of delve into the different themes that Satoshi Kon, rest in peace, really addressed and like talked about. One of the major themes is identity and how fragile identity actually is. I'm gonna actually take the DVD out and just like, hold on. Yeah. So how fragile it actually is and how subjective it actually is. And most people wouldn't say that, right? They would say like, no, like I know who I am as a person and my identity is my personality, right? It's what makes me me. And it's not something that's subjective. It's not fragile. It's fixed, right? Like most people, if you ask them or if there was a poll, they would say like, no, I have that's an oversimplification, and that a lot of us have like a duality of the self or multiple selves within us. And there is this lie of this one fixed self where, especially in society, people want to pretend that it's that simplistic, right? I am a wife, or I am a mother, or whatever. I am a manager, I am a VP, I am a teacher, I am a coach, right? Whatever. Or whatever. I am a manager, I am a VP, I am a teacher, I am a coach, right? Whatever it is, right? And that's who you are, and that's it. And that there's no complexities, there's no contradictions, there's no nuances, there's no friction, there's no frisson, and like that's not true, right? So it also talks about the fact that there's a lie of the self, right? So if that's not true, then this idea of like, who are you? If somebody was just to ask you, like, who are you? Like, who are you as a person, right? It's the idea behind the question. There's an assumption that there's only, no matter what you say, no matter how many adjectives you give, how many different descriptors, like basically at the end of the day, you are only one descriptors. Like basically at the end of the day, you are only one identity. And it's like, no, right? That's not true. That baseline assumption isn't true. So it's not even that it's not true for most people. The assumption itself is incorrect. And there is a duality of self that a lot of people experience, right? Whether it's, they are an innocent person And a lot of the times, maybe they feel like they're somebody that has a lot of maybe impulses that are not so innocent whatsoever at all, right? And again, that tension, right? Because the lie is like, well, that's not true, right? Like if you're somebody that tends to be innocent and compassionate and kind, it's like, why would you have darker impulses, right? If we're talking about identity. And it's like, what do people mean by identity, right? That's also something that's asked in the film, right? So we're going to get into Perfect Blue a lot. I have notes that go for a long time. So get comfortable if you're actually going to stay in this live with me. But yeah, what do people mean by that, right? Because they're not just saying, what do you like, right? Or they're not just saying, hey, describe your personality, right? Personality, we're told, is not the exact same thing as your identity, because we're told, no, your identity is who you are as a person. What does that even mean though, right? Because it implies that it's not something that can just change, right? It implies that it's something that is integral to who we are as a person, that it's not going to just change overnight. It's not something that's going to go back and forth, right? We're like, oh, okay, one day I'm this, the next day I'm that, right? One day I'm somebody, like, let's say that I care about liberation and fighting for a struggle, and I care about justice, and I care about people that are marginalized, and then the next day I don't care, and I want to just go for mine, and I want to just go for myself, and I want to just build myself up, right? And I just want to be ambitious, and I want to step on people and crawl over their backs, right? How do you resolve, maybe somebody would say, those two different identities? But it's like the concept of an identity, what Satoshi Kon was challenging people with in Perfect Blue, is like the concept is wrong. So he did that in a lot of different ways. So we're going to get into it, but also like the loss of identity, right? So even if the concept is wrong, it definitely exists throughout our society, right? So like usually when people say like, oh, she changed, that's not who she was. Like, I used to know her as a person and I can't believe the way she's acting now. Usually if you're saying it with that strong of a tone of voice, you do mean like something in their identity changed, right? Whether we're talking about a politician, an actor, a singer, some other kind of celebrity. It could just be like a community figure, maybe someone at church. It could be a political activist, right? The list goes on and on and on and on, right? Or maybe just somebody you know in your personal life. It could be a friend, it could be a partner, an adult child. I mean, really, right? But it's like they basically betrayed whatever your concept of their identity was, right? And it's like, okay, does the concept make sense, right? So one of the things I want to talk about first, now we're going to get detailed. So those are just like some of the macro concepts in terms of like the duality of the self, the lie. Things I want to talk about first. Now we're going to get detailed. So those are just like some of the macro concepts in terms of like the duality of the self, the lie of the self, right? And the fact that identity is fragile and subjective instead of it being one fixed identity. But let's get into the actual themes that are explored in Perfect Blue. So split psyche, right? So anytime somebody is a celebrity, right? I don't care if you're a K-pop singer, I don't care if you're an actress, I don't care if you're a talk show host, right? Game show host. Like if you are in the public sphere and you have a persona that you're presenting to the public, right? You're splitting your psyche. Like that's what you're doing, because you have your public self and you have your private self, and however intertwined the two, like that's what you're doing, because you have your public self and you have your private self, and however intertwined the two might be, however similar they might be, or even if they're totally different, they are separate, right? And that is something that Satoshi Kon really explores, right? In Perfect Blue. He was prescient though. So Perfect Blue came out in 1997. This was way, way, way before any social media, okay? So obviously like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, Snapchat, like none of that shit, like MySpace, Friendster, like go back to the old networks that came out first, right? I'm 43, so I remember all that stuff. I had a High Five, right? I had a Friendster, I had a MySpace, right? This is way before any of that came out because it's 1997. This is like the beginning of the internet. I can tell you that in 97, it was like, I think I had AOL, dial-up internet. It was like version 3.0, right? So like, that's how old this is. But he was very prescient because he foresaw how far the psyche split was going to go. Because nowadays, it's not even just celebrities that split their psyche, right? I mean, I know I'm here doing this live because I'm talking to you all about this, but it's anybody that creates social media content is splitting their psyche, right? And again, I don't care how similar it is to how you are. It's not actually the exact same person, right? So you're still presenting some kind of a character, or it's like if you had a bad day at work, you're probably not going to come in and go, okay, I'm going to talk to you guys about Perfect, right? Perfect Blue. It's like, okay, I'm going to talk to you guys about Perfect Blue, right? And he could see all of that. Like, you're still putting yourself through a filter for the public. It's not like I know any of you guys, right? And he could just see where that was going to go way, way back in 1997, right? So that's one of the things that he talks about a lot is that, okay, Mima was a celebrity. So if you don't know anything about it, she was a J-pop idol singer, and then she leaves the group she's in and she becomes an actress. And it's a very, very, very dark procedural drama she's in that has a lot of very graphic content in it. So I'd be careful what I say because it's TikTok and whatever. But yeah, he could just see the split of our public and private lives and what we present to the world. So let's say you don't create content though. Let's say that you don't do lives, you don't like create reels, you don't do shorts, you don't do this, you don't do that. But if you still post about your personal life, right? Let's say if you have Facebook or you have Instagram, you're still creating a presentation of yourself that is very curated, right? That's what most people are doing. Like, hey, I went on vacation. Hey, I got a promotion. Hey, I have a boyfriend now. Hey, I'm in a relationship now, right? You're posting things usually that go well for you, or when you're having fun, when you're out with your friends, when you're doing your thing, dressing up, whatever, right? You're presenting the highlights. It's not like that's not well known about social media, but it didn't even exist when Perfect Blue came out. And he could just see where the internet was most likely going to go, right? So we'll get into it more, but there's a very big plot point around a blog about Mima, the main character, called Mima's Room, right? Which is a blog that's written by a stalker that is presenting themselves as a fan that is protecting the true Mima, okay? The real Mima, because I told you, she ends up leaving the very innocent J-pop idol group that she was in for a few years, and she goes into this very, very hardcore, very dark, very violent, very, you know, like explicit, I will say, procedural drama where there's a lot of scenes she does that are like very, 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 very adult oriented. So this fan is saying that he is going to stop what he is calling the imposter. But he knows all these things about what Mima's actually doing in her real life, like where she's going shopping. It's really creepy though. Like the blog actually talks about the fact that like when she takes a bath, she steps into her bathtub with her right foot first. So it's like, okay, obviously you should then be asking like, who was this person at that point, right? I could maybe follow somebody to see where they're buying their groceries. So the blog mentions like grocery items she's buying, and like it knows where she's shopping. It mentions like bus stops that she's getting on the bus at. Okay, but like you could follow somebody, right? But it's like, obviously for them to know that, it's like they're staring into her window, or like, did they break into her apartment, right? So that's the first thing that Satoshi Kon really talks about is like split psyche. Because like I said, if identity is as fixed as we like to pretend it is in our society, like that's not who she is as a person. Even that saying, right, really reinforces the idea that who we are is one fixed identity and that's it. We wouldn't have a split psyche, right? That term wouldn't even exist. Like I said, even when celebrities do it for a reason and it's on purpose, the fact that it is something that they can do, to me, that proves the lie of, nope, it's just one identity and that's just who we are as people and as a person. And it's like, that's not true. So that's like a split psyche, right? So kind of split right down the middle if you think about that. But Perfect Blue also talks a lot about multiple personas, right? So at the end of the day, like I was just talking about with social media, Satoshi Kon, the director of Perfect Blue, he was very prescient that we're all going to have these exaggerated versions of ourselves that we're going to constantly be presenting. So way back in 1997, right, almost 30 years ago, right, it was really more obviously celebrities that were doing this because there wasn't like a vehicle for an everyday person to do this because we just didn't have like social media and all that stuff yet. But he could just see where it was going, you know? And it's like now you have all these different versions of yourself, right? So like maybe on your ASMR channel, you're one way and you're totally calm and you're quiet and like you don't talk about your life and you don't give anybody any details or information about yourself. So like maybe that's one persona that you have. But then let's say if you have a gaming channel, you're loud, you're doing let's plays and you're yelling, you're being extra, you're being over the top, right? Just to give you an example. And then maybe if you have a separate channel where it's like a vlog, right? And you're just showing people like your makeup and your avatar, you see what I'm saying, right? There are these endless selves that we can just keep creating now, right? And like that's kind of a sorry, invites me to co-host. Sorry. I'm still getting used to TikTok. I didn't even know you could invite. Sorry. I'm still getting used to TikTok. I didn't even know you could invite somebody to co-host. But that's kind of a creepy concept, right? It's the inverse, right? Thanks. It's the inverse of the lie, which is one fixed identity. It's like endless identities, right? Neither one of those things is good, right? And he could just see like, okay, where is this technology going to go? Right now it's rudimentary, right? It's 1997, it's dial-up internet, it's AOL, Yahoo's the search engine. YouTube was not even created until 2005, right? There's not even a MySpace yet. There's no Friendster yet, right? But Satoshi Kon just sat down and asked himself, like, okay, so we basically just have like websites now, message boards, right? If you go back and you think about like AOL message boards, right? We have websites and we have blogs, right? Where's it going to go though? And like, what are some of the darker places this can go? And like, that's what I was saying in my last live with Ghost in the Shell. Like 90s anime really examined through that lens of like, where is some of this futuristic technology and some of the obsession with technology, that there should be no limits to it? Where is some of that going to take us in the coming decades? And is some of, what's the dark side to some of it, right? And are we going to lose parts of our humanity in the process? So, yeah, that kind of leads right into like dissociation, right? Because it's like if you're constantly splitting yourself, you're going to start to lose the definition of like, what do you even mean by that, right? Which one is the real you? And are you even going to be able to keep up? It's like, was this my ASMR or was this my gaming? Am I loud today? Am I quiet? You know what I'm saying? So I mentioned Mima's World. So that was a blog that her stalker was updating, saying that ever since Mima left the J-pop idol group and started to pursue an acting career, and she did a lot of things. She did a photo shoot that was very, very controversial. I'm trying to not say anything that's going to get me flagged on here. Okay, so there's a lot that happens, but Mima starts to read the blog and starts to question, like, who is this fan? Who is this person? How do they know what I'm doing every day, right? How do they know what I'm doing inside of my apartment? She lives in a really small one-bedroom apartment, but this person can see everything she's doing. Like, they know when she's taking baths and things like that. So there's a part where she's really starting to dissociate, and she's reading the blog, and she can't remember what she did that day. So we're going to get into that, like memory versus hallucination versus dreams and fantasies versus reality. And is reality more subjective than we want to admit, right? So I talked about the fact that like the self is a lot more subjective than we want to admit, but is reality. So Mima is reading the blog, Mima's World, and she says to herself, basically, what did I do today? But like her voice is like numb, right? And she's reading the blog. This person is obviously stalking her. He knows every grocery store she's been to, every bus stop she's been to. He can see inside her apartment. And then the blog says, pretending they're Mima, because the point of the blog is, I'm the real Mima. I would never do the things that Mima is doing. I wouldn't have left the girl group. And it says, I went shopping in Harajuku today. And Mima reads that on the website and she goes, I guess I went shopping in Harajuku today. But like completely dissociated. So like there's no emotion, there's no affect, like dead eyes, right? Like just lifeless voice. And it's like, yeah, you can get to that point, right? Because if we talk about Mima, I talked a lot, of course, about like social media, because the larger themes and like how correct Satoshi Kon was about where all this technology ended up leading. He was very prescient. But if we get back to the actual, like the world of the anime, 1,000% her being Mima in the J-pop idol group, where she has to be pretty and demure and polite and completely, where she has to be pretty and demure and polite and completely coquettish at all times, right? And she's an adult, right? She's 21, right? When the anime starts. And then she leaves and she's determined to break away from her good girl image, from her innocent image, and she wants to be taken seriously as an actress, and she's willing to do anything for that. So as I said, she gets a role on this really gritty, very violent, very, 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 very explicit procedural drama. And she agrees to film an assault scene that's very, very, very graphic. That can lead to dissociation because, you're presenting it to the public, right? But it's still roles that you have to inhabit. So you go from being this like good girl, squeaky clean, super feminine, super coquettish, super demure J-pop idol to playing this role. She was an exotic dancer. I want to be careful that I don't get flagged on here, but she was an exotic dancer in this procedural drama. Like I said, that's very violent, that was very graphic, and in the drama, she's assaulted. So you couldn't have two roles that were more different. And then if you think about the J-pop idol group, it's like, okay, she was in a music group for 3 years. So yes, while I get, if we think about like K-pop groups, J-pop groups, like of course they are presenting personas to the public, but it's not like you're being given a script, right? So it's a lot more that like, okay, anytime that you are, performing with the group, or if you're doing like a fan meeting, or if you're being interviewed, right? If you're on tour, anything like that, right? If you're doing like a V live stream, right? You have to be on for the fans and be in the character of whatever role you're playing in that group. So I think that also definitely led to her dissociating. And then on top of that, she had the fan, stalking her, right? Mr. Mimania, right, is what the fan's name. You're led to believe that it's him, right? So she now has a stalker saying, okay, you are not the real Mima, because the real Mima would never have agreed to play the role of an exotic dancer. She wouldn't have agreed to have been on a violent show like this that is extremely explicit. She wouldn't have agreed to film an assault scene. So she's got all of these different fragments, I would say. I really think a lot of the, sorry, I have so many anime here, so I'm going to do multiple lives, but so much of Perfect Blue is about identity fragmentation and the fragmentation of the self, right? Because it's like, she obviously, Mima, knew that when she was in Cham, it had nothing to do with her, right? Because it's like, she obviously, Mima, knew that when she was in Cham, it had nothing to do with her, right? She was fulfilling a role. We're going to film it for a few months, and then hopefully, her goal was for her acting career to be launched. But it was completely going against her previous image that she had in the J-pop idol for 3 years, J-pop idol group. So that leads us to one of the biggest themes in Perfect Blue, which is dreams, fantasies, right? So they're similar, right? Like if you have a dream or a nightmare versus like you're just fantasizing, right? You're daydreaming. They're both imaginings, right? Whether you're asleep, whether you're awake, versus reality. So-called reality, like me talking to you guys right now, you guys joining my life right now, reality, versus memory, right? So you just remembering something that happened, right? versus a hallucination, right? So you think you see something or you think you hear something that's not actually there. And how do you know which is which? And that is such a big part of Perfect Blue. Is there an objective way to actually figure out which is which? Is everything subjective, and is reality itself subjective? So I already talked about the fact that, the idea of this one fixed identity that everybody has that ties in very neatly to the self is very subjective and doesn't exist. But what about reality, right? And what is the interplay between dreams and fantasies, memories, hallucinations, reality? So now we're going to really get into it, okay? So I've already mentioned Perfect Blue came out way, way back, almost 30 years ago, 1997. So a lot of the parasocial dynamic that exists now between celebrities and fans really didn't exist to that extent back in 1997. Okay, I'm not saying you didn't have like fanatics and stuff like that, but it's like you didn't have this direct interaction that Twitter gives fans nowadays. Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, Twitch. There was no apparatus for that, of course, in 1997. There was no apparatus for a celebrity to live stream, right? There was no apparatus for that, of course, in 1997. There was no apparatus for a celebrity to live stream, right? Or to talk directly. There was no apparatus for that, of course, in 1997. There was no apparatus for a celebrity to live stream, right? Or to talk directly. That resurfaced again and again and again throughout the anime, because it's like, who is the real Mima, right? So that's something a lot of characters asked, whether it's Mr. Mimania. He was a very obsessive fan of the J-pop idol group that Mima was in before she left the group to become an actress. Mima asks the question as she's starting to dissociate. Mima asks the question as she's starting to dissociate. It's something that comes up again and again. Who are you, right? Who is the real Mima? Again, do we have one fixed self, or is that idea a lie, right? Is it just an illusion, right? So there's a couple of quotes now that I'm going to go through, like from the anime, because we're going to really, really, really get into it now. So the procedural drama that I've mentioned a few times that Mima got an acting role in was called, the procedural drama that I've mentioned a few times that Mima got an acting role in was called Double Bind, okay? So she was on the set of Double Bind, and Mima was talking to an actress that she was working with, and she tells the actress, I don't know anything about myself anymore, okay? So they're just talking in between takes. The actress replies, well, how do you think you know that person that you were a second ago is the same person, even like a minute, not an hour, a second, you know that they're the same exact person? A continuous stream of memories. That's the only way that you could, objectively confirm that, right? So the actress is continuing her response to Mima. Given only that, we all create illusions within ourselves, saying that we each only have one fixed persona. Really think about that, right? Because that continuity of memories really is the only proof, right? It's like, I remember that I was born on October 28th, and I remember that I'm, a Scorpio. I remember that I majored in psychology in college, right? So on and so forth, right? Like anybody could make a list. I remember I got these tattoos, right? And it's like, that's really what it is, right? Like if you think of people that obviously have like memory disorders, right? That's not loss of self, right? That loss of identity that happens is because, they lose their memories gradually over time. So Mima then says to the actress on set, she is scared that her other self might do something bad. The actress replies, it's all right. There is no way that illusions can come to life. So illusions were mentioned twice. So Satoshi Kon, rest in peace, never did anything by mistake, okay? So the actress said, we all create illusions within ourselves, saying that we each only have one fixed persona, right? Then she again comes back to Mima, and she says, there is no way that illusions can come to life. Okay. To Mima, and she says, there is no way that illusions can come to life. Okay. So Mima the popularity and fame that Mima did with her J-pop group. So Mima's talking to Rumi, sorry, and she says, the other self that is buried deep within my heart. So they were talking about Mima's World, that blog that I said the stalker set up. And Rumi was telling her, like, hey, stop going on it. Like, this person is just trying to upset you. And they can't accept that you have moved on from the J-pop group. And there's no point in working yourself up and reading it every single day. And that was Mima's response. And she was saying, okay, but I think the person writing this blog might be more like the actual real me than I am. Because she had a lot of course, conflicting feelings about some of the choices she had made, Mima, since she left the J-pop group. So I said she did a very controversial photo shoot. And then I told you she decided to accept an acting role in a procedural drama that was very graphic, very explicit, where she was assaulted. So, like, night and day from her previous good girl image. But some of those decisions were weighing on her very heavily. So she obviously didn't want to be in the girl group anymore. That doesn't mean, of course, that she was 100% fine with everything that had happened since then. Some of what she was doing, she knew it was extreme. She felt it was the only way that the public would accept her as a serious actress. And she felt like she had to be extreme to break away from her previous J-pop idol image. So the thing that I wanted to highlight about that is she says the other self, right? That is buried deep within my heart. So we have a lot of references now to the fact, again, that there isn't just one self, one fixed identity, right? And that it's much more nuanced than that, complex than that, messier than that, and that it's a lie, basically, that we tell ourselves pretending that things are that simple when they are in fact not. So now we are back to Double Bind. So this is more quotes, okay? So she just finished filming and she is running out of the TV studio onto the streets, okay? And a truck is actually literally about to hit her, okay? And then as the viewer, you can see that it's driven by Mr. Mimania, her stalker, okay? So it does hit her, and then instead of Mima dying, so the truck hits her, she wakes up in bed in her apartment. So after she wakes up, Mima says maybe the truck actually hit her in reality, and that her waking up in her bed in her apartment is just an illusion. So illusion, this is the third time illusion's been mentioned. So I want to bring up Vanilla Sky for a second. So I don't know if any of you saw Vanilla Sky. It came out in 2007, I believe. I might be wrong about that. Might have been earlier. Came out a while ago. I've seen it. It's an amazing movie. Tom Cruise, Penelope Cruz, Cameron Diaz. Okay. It's very similar to Tom Cruise, Penelope Cruz, Cameron Diaz. Okay. It's very similar to Vanilla Sky. And it's like these movies that really challenging you, as I said, to think about what is a dream, what is a memory, what is a hallucination, what is reality, okay? And it's similar because I want to be clear that, it was 2002, but Perfect Blue came out 5 years earlier than Vanilla Sky, so 1997 versus 2002. If you go back and watch Vanilla Sky, so if you haven't seen it, watch it. It's amazing. If you go back and watch it, it's very clear, and a lot of people don't get this, that Tom Cruise's character actually died when Cameron Diaz crashed the car, okay? That's pretty early on in the movie. The rest of the film is just Tom Cruise dreaming in the cryogenic frozen state he's in. So there is a company called the Life Extension in the movie that cryogenically freezes people that can afford to pay for that. And then the idea is that they would be unfrozen, at some point in the future when that technology exists, right? But the idea is that they would be unfrozen, at some point in the future when that technology exists, right? But it's a dream. So there's proof. Like if you go back, there's a part where Tom Cruise's character's car has a registration date of February 31st, there isn't 31 days in February. So there's one clue. There's another clue. There's a scene where there are a bunch of life extension employees that are wearing like hazmat suits. They're in an elevator, and there is a snowman in the elevator with them. Like, if you pause that scene, this is on my Tumblr. If you pause that scene, there is a snowman randomly, and like he's in the elevator with them, but nobody says anything about that. There's obviously like this is a dream. Lastly, if you look at Tom Cruise's patient number, because he's a life extension client, as I just said, it's PL 515NT dash 4R 51MS. If you write that out, PL 515NT dash 4R 51MS, it is very clear that it is pleasant dreams. It's a dream. So take it back to Mima, right? She was saying, okay, did the truck hit me, right? And is all of this an illusion? Like, did I not really just wake up in my bed? Am I not awake right now? Is this conversation that I'm having with Rumi, with my manager, not real? Am I actually maybe in a hospital? That's a question, you know, to ask again and again. So, probably Mr. Mimania does not have a truck driving license. So that's a clue right there, because the anime shows Mr. Mimania behind the wheel, and it's like, if you see him, he's just not somebody that looks like he's doing that. He's got a very bizarre appearance and literally looks like he does nothing but go to these J-pop idol concerts 24/7. Her reality was just completely crumbling at that point. So after the truck almost hits Mima, like I said, she wakes up in bed the next day, right? And Rumi is there. Her manager is there. So Mima's awake in bed. She's watching TV. The news is on. There's a story about like economic planning and new Citizens Life Index. So the two of them are talking, right? So Mima's talking to her manager, Rumi. And Mima says, oh, it's been a long time since I've seen you, to Rumi. And Rumi's just like, yeah, I've been busy. So Mima says that she's concerned that just like her character on the TV show that she's playing a role on, Double Bind, that she might have another personality that might be acting out on its own and hurting people around her. So like the photographer who took the pictures of her, the director of the show, the manager that booked her the role. There's a lot of characters that actually get unalived in Perfect Blue. And she tells Rumi, like, what if this is happening to me? Like, what's happening to my character on Double Bind? What if I have a split personality and that second person is Mima? I'm not even aware of it. So that's the conversation that happens in Mima's bedroom with her manager, Rumi. Okay, then the anime goes from that conversation right back to the Double Bind set. So the crew is filming a scene from the day before. So just like I mentioned, Mima sees Mr. Mimania. So he's not driving the truck now. She sees him in the crowd that is in the TV studio. And then the director yells, okay, take two. So what's going on here, right? How can Mr. Mimania be on a TV set when he is not an actor on Double Bind, right? So you're starting to see there's a lot of things that just are not coming together, that aren't making sense, right? The truck appeared to hit her, so how could she wake up the next day and not be hurt? Mr. Mimania probably doesn't have a truck driving license. If the truck hitting her was a dream, she's in the TV studio and appears to be awake. How can Mr. Mimania be there and nobody's questioning who he is, right? When he's not an actor. So there's a lot that is not easily explained away by saying, oh, that was just a dream, right? So it's more complicated than that, right? So we go from the director yelling take two to Mima being right back in bed. So these are very quick, like this is one after the other. So the anime cuts right back to Mima being in bed. She wakes up again. Once again, the TV is on the same news station. Economic planning, new citizens' life index. Once again, Rumi visits her. The two of them have tea again, right? So this is the same exact scene that the viewer has just seen. And Mima says that she can't distinguish. Today from yesterday. She says that to Rumi. And then Mima says, once again, Rumi, it's been a while since I've seen you. Then Rumi says, no, I just saw you yesterday. Okay, so obviously there's a lot going on here because the news segment is exactly the same, word for word. There's no way that could happen in real life, right? So what sense does that make, right? So it's not like, oh, Rumi just visited her twice in a row. It's like, no, it actually seems like this is repeating itself. So Mima gets upset and she grips the teacup in her hand so tightly that it breaks and her hand is cut and she starts bleeding. Then Mima looks at her hand and she sees the blood and she asks Rumi, is the blood real? So we then go right back to the set of Double Bind, so the TV show, and the photographer who took the photos of Mima, the explicit photos, has been unalived, okay? So Rumi, Mima's manager, is in his apartment. He's disguised himself as a pizza delivery person she has, and she attacks him, and he's no longer alive. But that is interspersed, that scene of Rumi attacking him and killing him is interspersed with Mima on the set of Double Bind killing a character that her character kills, right? So she's acting, but it's becoming very blurred, right? Because the photographer is actually deceased in real life. Okay, once that scene ends in the anime, you hear the director say, all right, take three. So there's really something going on, because if you think back to what I said, when Mima was in bed and she woke up, and she was saying to Rumi, I haven't seen you in a while, and the truck had almost hit her, and she asked if the truck hit her and if this was a dream. Then she was on the set of Double Bind, right? And then she saw Mr. Mamania there, right? And then the director said, all right, take two. And then he's yelling, take three. So what's going on with him yelling these takes of things that aren't making sense? The director would have asked Mr. Mamania, what are you doing on my set? You're not an actor, right? So after the director yells, take three, Mima's back in bed now for the third time. She wakes up in her bedroom. So she's staring at her trembling hands this time. So the first two times she wakes up, like I said, the TV's on, the news is on, it's an economic planning agency, a new life index, and her manager Rumi is there. And Mima says, oh, I haven't seen you in a long time. This time, Mima wakes up, but instead of that happening, the viewer says, oh, I haven't seen you in a long time. This time, Mima wakes up, but instead of that happening, the viewer just sees that her hands are shaking and trembling. So we actually don't know, but instead of that happening, the viewer just sees that her hands are shaking and trembling. So we actually don't know, are her hands shaking because she broke the teacup? That was the second time she woke up, remember? Like, Rumi says, what do you mean? It's been a long time since I've seen you. I just saw you yesterday. And then Mima understandably got so upset, she broke the teacup, right? Or is it because, like, her reality is splintering all around her? Whatever the answer was, the closet is partly open, and the viewer and Mima can see that the photographer who took the explicit photos of Mima, his bloody clothes are in her closet. So think about that. We just saw, though, in a previous scene, her manager going over to the photographer's house, disguising herself as a pizza delivery person, and then assaulting and killing him, right? And then that was interspersed, like I said, with scenes of Mima on the set of Double Bind, and her character killed a character on the show. Then the director yelled, cut. It went back and forth. But the photographer's bloody clothes are now being shown in Mima's closet. So it's like, did Mima harm him? And then if that's what happened, how do you explain Rumi being shown going over there? They look nothing alike. Like, Mima is 21, Rumi is probably in her mid to late 40s. She's short, she's pretty overweight. Mima's very thin, very feminine looking, very beautiful, right? Okay. It goes right back then to the set of Double Bind, and Mima is told by the director, right? These scenes are happening one after the other, to breathe harder than she did in rehearsal, and he says, come on, you just killed somebody. It has to look realistic. This is the director. Then he says, action. Okay. As soon as the director says that to Mima on the set of Double Bind, it goes right back to Mima being in bed yet again. This is the fourth time we're seeing Mima wake up in bed. After she wakes up, it goes right back, the anime goes right back to the set of Double Bind, the TV show that Mima's an actress on. And Mima's character, so I told you she plays an exotic dancer, the dancer's name is Yoko, is saying, does she know who she is? She's asked that question while she's filming the show. And as the character Yoko, Mima replies, Mima Kirigoe. I'm a pop idol. No, an actress. Okay, how meta is that? Because that is the actual name of the actress who used to be a pop idol in Cham. Her name is Mima Kirigoe. She is playing an exotic dancer named Yoko on a TV show, the crime procedural called Double Bind. But when she is asked the question of who she is, she responds and says, I'm Mima Kirigoe. I am a pop idol, which Mima was. Then she says, no, an actress, which she is now. Okay. Once she says that as the character, the other characters on Double Bind start to discuss Yoko, the character, the exotic dancer, saying that she has dissociative identity disorder, or DID, and that basically the trauma from her being assaulted at the club she works at created these multiple identities, the DID. So, Mima, in character, right? So she's responding as Yoko, says, that's right, I'm an actress. That's her response. The director then yells, cut. Okay. So, what's real and what's not? If you just think about all of that. So, we're still on the set of Double Bind, and what happens is the production crew decides to watch the take back. So they're rewinding the tape, and they're watching it. But when they play it back, the take has changed. Literally from what Mima just filmed. It is not the same. So when they play it back and they're reviewing it, Mima's character, so Yoko, actually calls herself Rika Takakura. So the name of the character has suddenly changed. And instead of her name in real life, like I said, which is Mima Kirigoe, she claims she's a model. So instead of saying, I'm Mima Kirigoe, and I'm a pop idol, no, an actress, when they play the tape back, she is now saying, I'm Rika Takakura, and I am a model. Okay, so how do you explain that, right? How do you explain somebody saying one thing and then they rewind the tape, press play, and it's a totally different line? It's a different name, different everything, right? Again, this is the point that Satoshi Kon's making throughout the anime, right? Who's imagining what? Who's hallucinating what? What's real and what isn't, right? So, Yoko's DID is still discussed, but there's a new line that's been added. So it's not just that the name changed to Rico, and it's not just that the profession changed. There's a new line now where she is saying that she killed her sister and then later became a top model. Okay. Mima's character then says, that's right, I'm a model. Then the director announces, that's it, that's the take. Okay. Now, I talked before about Vanilla Sky, right? So after Double Bind wraps, so they finish filming, TV show is over. Mima calls her co-star over and they're talking and they're just discussing the show, and they run into each other in the hallway as they're leaving. And Mima's co-star tells her to remember that illusions can't come to life. That's the 4th time that illusions are being mentioned, right? And she tells Mima, and it's the 2nd time, actually, she's telling Mima that illusions can't come to life. And she tells Mima she should stop dreaming soon. Remember when Mima was hit by the truck and she woke up in her bed and she asked her manager, Rumi, did the truck actually hit me? And is this an illusion? Me waking up in bed, in my bedroom, in my apartment, you in my bedroom talking to me. Is this the illusion? And was I actually hit by the truck? Okay. So, you now have her co-star, now that they finished filming Double Bind, telling Mima she'll stop dreaming soon. What does that mean? You finished filming a TV show, you're both actresses, you're small talking, you're on the way out, you run into each other in the hallway. Why would her co-star tell her she'll stop dreaming soon? So there's a lot more going on in this anime. There's a lot more that Satoshi Kon is challenging his audience to grapple with versus somebody just saying it was a dream, or it's a plot hole, or it's a hallucination, or Mima just had the idea in real life. It doesn't cover everything off, right? Some of that does not explain, like what I just said. Why would the co-star say that to her? So the co-star leaves after telling Mima that. So she says she'll stop dreaming soon, and she leaves the building. As soon as she leaves, Mr. Mimania comes in right away. So Mima's stalker comes in. Like, it's literally like co-star leaves, Mr. Mimania comes in. And then he advances on Mima, and then the anime cuts to Mima's manager talking to someone at her talent agency. He's saying that he got her a new role and that there's some sketchy scenes in it, and then he gets in his car and he drives off. So it then goes back to inside the TV studio. It's completely empty, right? Because they've completely wrapped the show. Everybody's left by now. And Mr. Mimania, so Mima's stalker, is there. And it's the same part of the TV studio where Mima's character that she's playing, Yoko, the exotic dancer, was assaulted by the customers at the club she works at. So Mr. Mimania is now holding her down on that same stage in that same part of the TV studio. And she manages to push him off, and then he yells at her. Mr. Mimania yells, so her stalker, yells at Mima for not following the script and shouts, now take 2. What sense does that make? That just doesn't make any sense. If you think back to what I said about the blog, Mima's room, that obviously there was a stalker that knew what grocery store she was going to. They could see what she was doing in her apartment, and kept saying that the real Mima wouldn't have accepted a controversial, very explicit role like this, and would not have done that really, really racy photo shoot, and that he was going to protect the real Mima, and that he was going to stop the imposter, right? Who, of course, was the real Mima, because she just wanted to get away from her J-pop idol, and she wanted to be a serious actress, and she was willing to, take on some of these roles that did have, really controversial aspects to them. But why would the stalker even be at the TV studio? No one else is there. The second the co-star left, he was there. He wasn't there, that she turned around and he was there. How does that even make sense? And why would he care about the script? You're going from trying to assault her to saying she's not following a script, and then we hear the director's no, and then he says take 2. That doesn't make any sense, right? So again, it's questioning, is any of this real? like to ask that question. Is any of this real? Okay. So there's a fight at that point when Mr. Mamania says that to her. So he says, you're not following the script. And he says, and now take two. So then there's a fight and she's like trying to get him off of her. And there's this really, really frantic like anime music playing in the background now. So that was not happening before. Hold on, guys. Sorry. It made me confirm that I want to keep going with the live. So I hope you guys are still here. I had to move a puzzle piece together. But okay. So this frantic anime music, she's fighting him off, and then she kills him with a hammer. Then we hear the director's voice one last time. Okay, looks good. Wait a second. The director had left. The studio's empty. Remember? I said they wrapped shooting Double Bind, the procedural drama, right? Everybody left. I said Mima was leaving. She was talking to her co-star. They said goodbye. Then they ran into each other in the hallway as they were exiting the building. Then the co-star said, you'll stop dreaming soon. Then, literally the moment that the co-star left the building, she turned around and her stalker, Mr. Mamania, was there. And the director had been left at that point. The entire studio was empty because they had finished filming the drama. So how can the director then be there to yell, okay, looks good? And why would her co-star say to her, you'll stop dreaming soon? That there are many, many clues throughout Perfect Blue that what we are seeing is not real, or it's not how it's being presented to us, or it's not how Mima is perceiving it to be, or how Rumi is perceiving it to be. Is some of this a dream? Is it an illusion? Is it a hallucination? Is it a nightmare? Right? Does she have a split personality? Is it all of the above? Is it some of the above? Okay. So, basically, the sequence closes. All of this ends with Mima standing under the stage lights, right? In the studio, the TV studio, in front of a clapping, cheering audience. That is not actually there in reality, because remember I told you that the procedural drama had finished filming, so the studio was empty because everybody had left? But now we're seeing an audience that looks exactly like her fans from when she was in Cham. It was the same kind of like stage lights that you saw at the beginning of the anime when she was still performing as a J-pop idol, but in an empty TV studio? So again, that's telling you a lot of this is not even real. It's not even happening. So what if the preceding scenes were real? And what about the scenes before those scenes? How does Mima know? And how does the audience know? Like, how far back do you have to go in Perfect Blue to say, okay, that was real? I didn't even bring up every single, like, detail like that, because there was a part where the remaining members of her J-pop idol group, Cham, so they were two other women, right? They were performing on TV. And then suddenly, Mima's in the middle. So Mima was a lead singer, right? But they continued without her when she left to become an actress. But you see her in this like ghostly white outline. It's like she looks like an apparition, right? But both members react to her. So they're annoyed and they're frustrated, and they're confused and they're shocked and they have no idea what she's doing there. The audience, so this was a TV performance, right? So the audience that was there in person at the concert are thrilled that Mima's there because she had left the group a couple of months prior. So they can't believe that she showed up, right? But of course she's not there, right? Because Mima never ever performs with Cham ever again. She's acting, as I said, in the procedural drama. So how do you explain that? If you're going to say that Mima just, you know, it was in Mima's mind, because Mima was actually watching the performance on TV and she saw herself, but you can see her bandmates, her former bandmates, reacting to her, and the audience reacts to her. So then how can the explanation be, oh, Mima just thought of it in her mind, right? Mima, when she turned on the performance of her former, J-pop idol group, she envisioned herself there. No, because then her former bandmates wouldn't have reacted to her, and the audience that was there in person wouldn't have reacted to her. There are so many instances like that. Like I said, her co-star saying to her after the procedural drama wraps, Mima, you'll stop dreaming soon. There's so many instances of this, right? The director had left, so how could he have been there to yell cut, right? That just doesn't make sense. There's too many things that happen where you can't just say it's all in Mima's head, right? If you say that everything's explained by Mima herself having DID, that doesn't explain the apparition of her being at that Cham concert, right? So what's my explanation? I think that's the point. I think the point is that because you can't explain these things away, it's to prove to the audience that not just the idea of a fixed identity and a fixed self are an illusion, but that reality itself is very, very, very subjective, and that it's not objective as society portrays it to be and believes it to be. And I think that was the point, right? That was the point. How could that newscast be exactly the same 2 days in a row? It was word for word the exact same. So how can you have a day repeat itself, right? But then, of course, Rumi then says, no, I was just here yesterday. And the first time when Mima said, I haven't seen you in a long time, Rumi just said, yeah, I've been busy. How can you explain when Mima did the take on the set of Double Bind, when she does the take live and you're watching it as a viewer, she says that she's Mima Kirigoe. By the way, that's not her character's name. Her character's name in Double Bind is Yoko. Her name in real life is Mima Kirigoe. And the character in Double Bind is an exotic dancer who wants to be a model. Mima Kirigoe in real life was a pop idol who became an actress. So when she films the take the first time, she says the right thing. Oh, no, sorry. She says she's Mima Kirigoe. And then she says, I am a pop idol. Then she corrects herself, says, no, I'm an actress. So it's exactly what Mima went through in real life, right? She went through all of that to break away from her J-pop idol image. When they press play and they play the take back, it has changed to Mima saying she is somebody called Riko Takakura, who we've not heard anything about. Because again, the character's name on Double Bind was Yoko. And she says that she was a model that turned into an actress. And there's an additional line that was not there before, that she killed her sister. What sense does that make? The production crew is watching this back, and they're watching this, and that's what they hear. So again, you can't say like, oh, it's just Mima, playing it back, and it's Mima's DID. It's like, no, it's the entire production crew watching it back. So, I love Perfect Blue. It's my favorite anime of all time. And Satoshi Kon was an absolute genius. May he rest in peace. And I will be back with more lives about 90s anime. So follow along so you can kind of see what else I talk about. So, all right, see you guys later.